They were clapping. Strangers, smiling, cheering, recording. On the sand, beneath a sky brushed with the last hues of twilight, Amira Delgado stood barefoot, radiant in disbelief. Her hands covered her mouth. Her eyes shimmered with tears. Before her, on one knee, Dorian Vance held out a ring as a drone circled above, capturing every second of what looked like the beginning of forever. It wasn't. By sunrise, the video would be viral. By midnight, Amira would be gone. Shot 5 times in a luxury condo just blocks from that very beach. Have you ever looked at a couple and thought, they look perfect? Have you ever mistaken grand gestures for genuine love? In Clearwater Bay, nearly everyone had. Amira and Dorian were #couple goals. They worked out together. They posted romantic photos. They laughed, traveled, kissed in public. But sometimes, love stories aren't stories at all. They're warnings, dressed in roses, filtered in soft light, set to music. Dorian wasn't just a man in love. He was a man obsessed with control, wrapped in discipline, shadowed by demons no one wanted to confront. Not even Amira. The final image of her life is still online, frozen in celebration, minutes before her world collapsed. He had planned the proposal. He had arranged the photographer. He had even brought champagne. And he had also brought a gun. Let's be clear, this isn't a story about a tragic romance. It's a story about possessiveness disguised as passion. About how a woman's intuition was slowly muted by affection, attention, and apologies. It's about how a community, a mother, and a nation missed the warning signs until it was too late. What drives someone to kill the very person they claim to love? That's the question we're exploring today. This is the story of Amira Delgado, hairstylist, entrepreneur, friend, daughter. A woman who lit up rooms, lifted others, and died believing she was finally getting her happy ending. She never saw it coming. But someone should have. Before we continue, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a relationship that felt a little too intense, but you brushed it off as love? Do you know someone who ignored the red flags because the highs felt so good? Tell us in the comments. And if you find value in stories that reveal the truth behind the image, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Because someone out there needs this more than you know. Amira Delgado was the kind of woman who made people feel seen. Even on her worst days, she'd tilt her head, lock eyes with a client, and say, "Tell me what you want, today's about you." Her hair salon in Clearwater Bay wasn't just a business. It was a sanctuary, a little kingdom of mirrors, chairs, and chatter where women walked in frazzled and walked out fierce. Born and raised in Tampa, Florida, Amira was the youngest of 3 sisters and the only one who stayed close to home. Her mother, Yvette, was a nurse, a quiet woman with tired eyes and a heart that had weathered too many storms. Her father had left when Amira was just 5, and Yvette never remarried. The family was tight-knit, but not without its fractures. Amira had always been the peacekeeper, the fixer. The one who turned birthdays into surprises and bad days into inside jokes. But Amira also carried something heavy behind that electric smile, an ache to be chosen. Not just liked, not admired. Chosen. Completely. That yearning followed her into adulthood like a shadow, one she tried to outpace with accomplishments. By 26, she had her own salon. By 28, she was mentoring teen girls in the neighborhood. Her Instagram glowed with affirmations, makeup tutorials, soft focus selfies, and snippets of a life that looked like it was soaring. Then came Dorian Vance. He wasn't from Clearwater Bay. He wasn't from anywhere, really, not in the way people belonged to a place. He moved around a lot. Military kid turned motivational speaker, or so he said. When he walked into her salon the first time, it was for a sister he didn't really talk to anymore. He leaned against the counter, watched Amira laugh with a client, and waited, until the room cleared. "You got real peace about you," he told her. I'm trying to build that in my life. It was cheesy. But it landed. Dorian was tall, chiseled, with that kind of hard-to-place accent and quiet confidence that made people assume he had a story worth hearing. And oh, he did. He told Amira about trauma, struggle, growth. How he'd left behind toxic environments and was building a legacy. A coaching brand. A YouTube channel. I don't date for fun, he told her in week 2. I date for partnership. Marriage. Kingdom business. Amira had never met a man who spoke like that. Like he was already writing vows in his mind. They moved fast. Too fast, her sister Natalie warned. But Amira was floating. Dorian brought flowers to the salon. Left notes in her car. Sent texts at 6 a.m. that said things like, "Rise, Queen." He prayed with her. He told her she was the missing link to his vision. They were black excellence, he said. Destiny. But there were cracks. Small at first. He didn't like her posting selfies. He called it, inviting the wrong energy. He once told her to delete a photo because her neckline was too low. It's not about control, he said. It's about covering what's mine. He didn't like when she went out with her friends, either. I'm your safe space now, he said. Why do you still need the club? When her high school friend Micah dropped by the salon and hugged her a second too long, Dorian waited until they were alone and said, "He's still in love with you. Don't let open doors become entry points for the enemy." He dressed it all up in spiritual language, in love. And Amira, hungry for a godly man, for a future, wrapped it around herself like a blanket on cold nights. It was hard to talk to her during those months. Friends noticed. Her texts got shorter. Her laugh got quieter. Her mother said, "You okay?" more than once. And Amira always said yes. She didn't see the danger. Not yet. Dorian moved in after 7 months. Said it made sense financially. Said God was aligning their paths. But once he was there, everything changed. He restructured her salon's budget. Wanted her to post less and film them more. Started appearing in her videos, pitching himself as a life coach. He even started coaching her clients during hair appointments. Some women stopped coming. But Amira defended him. "He's just passionate," she said. "He wants me to win." Still, she looked tired. She cried in the bathroom once when her curling iron broke, then said it was allergies. She started showing up late, skipping her mentor sessions. Her edges thinned. Her silence thickened. Then came the night of the proposal. Dorian had planned it down to the second. Hired a drone guy. Paid a friend to happen to be there to film. He took Amira to the beach, told her to dress up, and dropped to one knee like it was the climax of a movie. She said yes, of course she did. Everyone cheered. The video went viral overnight. Couple goals, the comments read. This is the dream. But just 2 days before, Amira had Googled how to leave a controlling relationship without him getting mad. Her search history showed articles on narcissism. She had messaged a friend at 2:14 a.m. saying, "Something feels off. I'm scared I'll lose everything if I leave." That message would never be answered. Because 5 days after that proposal, on a Tuesday night in their penthouse condo, Dorian pulled out a Glock 19 during an argument and emptied the clip into the woman he claimed to love. 5 shots. 2 to the chest. 1 through her wrist. 1 to the shoulder. The final bullet lodged just beneath her jaw. Neighbors said they heard yelling. A thud. Then silence. Police said it looked personal. Intimate. Like he wasn't just trying to kill her, he wanted to erase her. But why? What happened between that picture-perfect proposal and the hollow sound of gunfire? The truth, as you'll see, had been brewing long before the first bullet was fired. It was a little after 11:45 p.m. when Officer Bailey Franks pulled into the parking garage beneath Clearwater Bay Residences. He had no idea that the call he was responding to, possible domestic disturbance, Unit 16B, multiple reports of gunshots, would explode into the biggest homicide investigation of his 12-year career. Inside the condo, the air still smelled of gunpowder. Amira Delgado's body was discovered just steps from the kitchen island, lying on her left side, phone still in hand. She was barefoot, wearing a peach-colored silk robe, blood soaking through the front. Her eyes were open. Frozen. The Glock 19 used in the shooting was placed neatly on the marble counter, oddly clean. No blood spatter. No fingerprints. Just resting there like someone had considered their next move carefully and decided. Let them find it. The 911 call hadn't come from Dorian. It had come from a neighbor, Alicia Warner, who lived directly across the hall. I heard shouting, like they were fighting. But it wasn't normal couple fighting, it was low, angry. Then I heard something fall. Maybe glass. Then 5 shots. I hit the floor. I called 911 right after the last one. When officers knocked on Alicia's door, she was shaking. It was like 5 back-to-back, pop 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 pop, she stammered. Inside 16B, there was no sign of forced entry. The place was spotless, unnaturally so. No overturned chairs, no shattered glass. Not even a knocked-over lamp. Just Amira's body. The Glock. And an eerie silence that felt too clean. Dorian Vance was nowhere to be found. His car, an all-black Tesla Model 3, was missing from the garage. His phone was powered off. His social media accounts, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, had all gone dark within 10 minutes of the time of death estimated by paramedics. 11:32 p.m. Detective Leo Arnett arrived on scene around 1:15 a.m. Tall, methodical, and known for his gut instincts, Arnett stood in the kitchen for nearly 10 minutes in silence, just observing. He left her there, he whispered to himself. She didn't die in some rage. He executed her and left. He could see it, this wasn't a crime of passion. This was something colder. Cleaner. The medical examiner later confirmed 5 gunshot wounds, 2 to the chest, 1 through the right forearm, defensive. 1 to the shoulder, and 1 that grazed under the jaw and lodged in the neck vertebrae. The kill shot had likely been one of the chest wounds. But she would have felt them all. The first break in the case came at 5:47 a.m., when Clearwater PD received a call from a woman named Denise Carter. She owned a lakeside cabin about 80 miles north, in Inverness. Dorian had once rented it for a retreat shoot, and Denise kept the door code the same. He showed up out of nowhere, she told police. Looked sweaty. Panicked. Told me not to ask questions. Said he needed a place to pray and think. I told him I was calling the cops. He ran. I swear to God, he ran like the devil was chasing him. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showed Dorian at 4:13 a.m., filling up the Tesla and buying 2 Red Bulls and a burner phone. He was wearing the same black hoodie from his last Instagram story, posted just 24 hours earlier, captioned, "Grateful. Growing. Focused." The manhunt began. By noon, news of Amira's murder was everywhere. Local beauty influencer found shot dead in condo, fiancé missing, Dorian Vance, life coach or liar? Hashtag Justice for Amira started trending on Twitter by 3 p.m. The public reaction was swift. Furious. Amira's online following, nearly 38,000 on Instagram, erupted with grief. Former clients posted screenshots of kind texts she'd sent them. Old photos flooded the timeline. Her laughing at a bridal shower, her dancing with a niece, her in the salon chair curling her own hair with that signature smile. The media dug up everything. Clips of Dorian's YouTube channel surfaced, full of alpha male monologues and motivational speeches laced with fire and brimstone theology. One video titled, "Submitting to God and Your Man, A Path to Power," sent shockwaves. "This man was a manipulator," said social commentator Raquel Ivy on a viral TikTok. "He cloaked abuse in Bible verses. And Amira was the casualty." But the cops weren't interested in commentary. They needed to find him. Detective Arnett ordered a forensic sweep of the condo. It paid off. In a bathroom trash bin, tucked under layers of tissues and Q-tips, crime scene techs found a balled-up piece of paper. A letter. Half-burned. "You made me feel like nothing was ever enough. Like I had to perform love for you. Maybe this is the only way you'll hear me now." It was unsigned. But the handwriting matched samples taken from Dorian's notebook, found in the Tesla a day later, abandoned near an underpass off Highway 301. Inside the car were receipts, fast food wrappers, and the burner phone, wiped clean. But the last known GPS signal put him near the Georgia state line just 12 hours earlier. The FBI was called in. Meanwhile, investigators interviewed Amira's close circle. Her sister Natalie broke down during questioning. "She told me last week that he'd threatened to ruin her business if she left. Said he'd expose her secrets. But she didn't have any secrets, he just wanted control. She was scared. She tried to act tough, but I knew. She wasn't sleeping." Another friend, salon co-worker Tiana Harris, added even more disturbing context. "Amira showed me a bruise on her arm once. Said she bumped into the table. But she flinched when I hugged her. I knew something wasn't right." The autopsy later confirmed prior bruising, weeks old, on Amira's upper arms and ribs. This wasn't the first time Dorian had laid hands on her. Still, the digital trail told the deeper story. In her iCloud notes were several drafts of breakup letters. Password-protected voice memos described arguments, controlling behavior, gaslighting. One chilling entry read, "If something happens to me, Dorian did it. I wanted to believe he loved me, but I think he only loved the version of me he could control." Those words were played at her memorial service 1 week later. More than 400 people attended. A candlelight vigil lit up the courtyard outside her salon. And beneath the white roses and printed photos, someone taped a note that read, "She died trying to be loved right." Back in Clearwater, the case officially turned into a fugitive pursuit. A national warrant was issued. Dorian Vance, once a rising star in self-help circles, was now America's most hunted man. But what drove him to murder the woman he'd just proposed to? The deeper truth was more twisted than anyone imagined. Because what began as spiritual love had morphed into psychological warfare. And as police traced Dorian's final steps before the shooting, they uncovered a secret even Amira hadn't fully realized: she wasn't the only woman who had feared him. 26 days had passed since the brutal murder of Amira Delgado, when the long hunt for Dorian Vance came to a sudden, quiet end. He was not found in hiding under a false identity or caught in a last-minute dash across a border. Instead, he was discovered kneeling in the back of a modest church in Decatur, Georgia, his childhood place of worship. There, surrounded by pews worn from years of silent prayer, he turned himself in, asking the pastor for a moment of confession before being taken into custody without resistance. But the story of his whereabouts during those missing weeks told a much darker tale. Dorian hadn't been drifting aimlessly. He'd found sanctuary in a secretive Christian men's fellowship known as the Brotherhood of Righteous Strength. Though the group would later deny knowledge of the murder, investigators uncovered encrypted messages exchanged between Dorian and its senior members. Messages saturated with cult-like language, referencing divine punishment, spiritual warfare, and coded talk about silencing rebellion. When the U.S. Marshals finally walked Dorian out of that church, he appeared thinner, unshaven, and subdued. There were no grand proclamations. No protests of innocence. Only the heavy silence of a man resigned to fate. He was flown under guard to Clearwater, Florida, and formally booked for first-degree murder, among other charges that included witness intimidation, firearm possession during a felony, and obstruction of justice. From the moment his mugshot was released, public interest erupted into a full-scale media storm. News vans lined the street outside the courthouse. Commentators debated his sanity, his faith, and his motive. Protesters and supporters gathered outside the courtroom, holding signs both condemning and defending him. The case had grown beyond a single act of violence, it had become a national conversation about power, religion, and control. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution came prepared with a case as methodical as it was devastating. Investigators had combed through Amira's phone, surfacing voice memos she had secretly recorded in her final weeks. Audio fragments where Dorian's voice could be heard diminishing her, controlling her, and all but dehumanizing her in their private home. One chilling recording captured him murmuring a veiled threat, comparing her fate to that of Eve, as if even God had removed disobedient women without hesitation. There was more. GPS data from the Tesla revealed that Dorian had circled the apartment complex the night of the murder, timing her patterns, calculating her vulnerability. Security footage showed him exiting the vehicle in a hoodie hours later, entering through a back stairwell he used to claim was always off-limits. Prosecutors painted the picture of a premeditated killing, committed by a man who saw Amira's independence as a betrayal of his control. They showed the scorched letter in the fireplace, its edges barely legible, a message of finality that Dorian had tried to erase in flames. They revealed a hidden burner phone recovered from his belongings, containing messages that revealed surveillance-like monitoring of her location and conversations. There were emails too, sent to his spiritual advisors, where Dorian lamented losing control of his designated helpmate. The narrative the prosecution laid out was terrifying in its clarity. Amira had tried to escape, and for that, Dorian had decided she did not deserve to live. The defense responded with an entirely different strategy, one that would quickly draw outrage from observers and advocates alike. They claimed that Dorian Vance was not a monster, but a man undone by trauma. His attorney traced Dorian's past through stories of abandonment, violence, and unresolved PTSD. The emotional instability that culminated in the murder, they argued, was not an act of calculated evil, but a breakdown rooted in years of mental illness. But it didn't stop there. In a disturbing twist, the defense turned their attention toward Amira herself. They introduced social media posts from years prior where she'd spoken about her struggles with anxiety, therapy, and the stress of her demanding career. They suggested that the couple's relationship had been volatile on both sides, and that Dorian's actions were a result of emotional chaos rather than cold calculation. Though this strategy planted seeds of doubt in a few spectators, the prosecution quickly dismantled the defense's attempts. They introduced former friends and colleagues of Amira who spoke of her increasing isolation, the way her laughter had become cautious, how she had distanced herself from people she once leaned on. The apartment, they said, had become more prison than home. But the most damaging blow to the defense came when they called a witness named Sierra Lemoyne to the stand. A former client of Dorian's, who claimed that Amira had harassed her out of jealousy and threatened to ruin Dorian's reputation. At first, the testimony threw the courtroom into unease. But just 2 days later, prosecutors dropped the hammer. Digital forensics revealed that Sierra and Dorian had been communicating behind the scenes for months. Their messages, many of which were encrypted and deleted, showed signs of flirtation and manipulation. The jury watched as the image of Sierra's impartiality disintegrated in real time. She was charged with perjury, her entire testimony was discredited, and her involvement cast a shadow of desperation over the defense. But nothing pierced the jury's heart more than the testimony of Natalie Delgado. Amira's sister, composed yet visibly shaken, took the stand and recounted a litany of warnings. She told them how Amira had started changing the way she spoke, how she stopped making eye contact during visits, and how she'd confessed, more than once, that she no longer felt like herself. Her voice, Natalie said, had begun to sound like it wasn't her own anymore. When she described the final phone call, the one where Amira whispered, almost inaudibly, that she feared her decisions were being monitored through her own devices, a chilling hush fell over the courtroom. After weeks of testimony, exhibits, and outbursts, the case went to the jury. They deliberated for nearly 12 hours. When the verdict was finally read aloud, the room held its collective breath. Guilty. First-degree murder. Dorian showed no reaction. He stood quietly as the sentence was read, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Behind him, the crowd erupted, some in tears, others in applause, and many in solemn silence. There would be no redemption arc for the man who had called himself a prophet. The state of Florida would ensure that he never harmed another soul again. But even as the trial ended, the ripple effects had only begun. The case prompted widespread debate about the dangers of coercive control in relationships, especially when wrapped in religious doctrine. Advocacy groups began pushing for stronger legislation that would recognize psychological manipulation as a precursor to physical abuse. And from this movement emerged a proposed piece of legislation called Amira's Law, designed to expand protections for victims of spiritual and emotional domination in domestic settings. Amira Delgado's life had been silenced in a single act of rage. But in the aftermath, her story had ignited a fire in the hearts of those who had watched it unfold, a fire that would demand justice, not just for her, but for all the women still trapped in silence. She was no longer just a victim. She was a symbol. A warning. And a voice that could never be truly erased. The trial of Dorian Vance unfolded not as a standard legal proceeding, but as a slow-motion tragedy, broadcast for the world to see, dissect, and debate. Inside the towering courtroom of Clearwater's Justice Hall, the air was thick with tension. Every seat was filled. Reporters tapped at tablets. Sketch artists captured every tear, every glare. And the world watched, waiting to learn the truth. From the opening gavel, it was clear that this was not merely a case of murder, it was a clash of ideologies. Control versus independence. Doctrine versus identity. The state versus a man who believed he answered only to God. Prosecutors opened with a thunderous statement, this was not a crime of passion. This was the methodical execution of a woman who had found the courage to walk away. The gallery fell silent. The jury leaned in. And from that moment, every minute of the trial felt like a new blow against the myth of Dorian's righteousness. The courtroom became a theater of evidence and emotion. One of the first bombshells came in the form of Amira's personal journals, entries she had written by hand, often late at night, pages dated, marked, and sometimes tear-stained. In them, she chronicled her slow disappearance. Not physically, but emotionally. Her own handwriting revealed how Dorian had taken apart her self-worth, decision by decision, until she no longer trusted her own thoughts. I used to speak freely. Now, I measure every word like a prisoner calculating rations, she wrote. The jury visibly recoiled. And if that shook them, the next exhibit broke them. A hidden camera, placed discreetly inside a carbon monoxide detector by Amira herself, had captured a chilling confrontation. On video, Dorian stood over her, voice cold and eerily calm, as he told her, "You were made from man's rib, so stay under my arm, or stay out of breath." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Jurors shifted in their seats. Even seasoned bailiffs looked shaken. If you've followed the story this far and believe stories like Amira's must be heard, now's a good time to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear the truth behind the headlines. These stories matter, and your support helps bring them to light. But the prosecution didn't stop with words. They brought in forensic experts who explained the trajectory of the bullet that killed Amira, how it was fired downward, from close range, through the side of her face as she was turning away. It told the jury one undeniable truth, she wasn't attacking. She was trying to escape. Next came the digital forensics unit, revealing Dorian's obsessive surveillance. He had used location tracking software on Amira's phone, planted spyware into her tablet, even accessed her calendar remotely to monitor therapy appointments. The pattern was unmistakable. He had been preparing for this act long before he ever lifted the gun. The defense, knowing their client's image was crumbling, attempted to pivot. They called on faith leaders, former mentors, religious scholars, to speak of Dorian's charitable past, his once sterling community image. They described a man broken by betrayal, abandoned by a wife who had, they claimed, turned worldly. One even referred to Amira's feminism as poison in a sacred vessel. But the damage was done. The prosecution responded with devastating precision. They produced former church members who had left Dorian's ministry after witnessing private abuse. One woman, hands shaking on the stand, recalled being chastised for wearing nail polish and told she would burn for vanity. She had filed a police report after Dorian grabbed her arm during a counseling session, but the charges were dismissed at the time due to lack of evidence. Now, her voice finally had weight. And then came the final emotional crescendo, the testimony of Amira's mother, Maricel Delgado. Her eyes were hollow, her voice soft but unbreakable. She told me she was afraid, she said. Not just of what he'd do, but that no one would believe her. That she'd sound crazy saying a man who smiles in public, preaches about God, and donates to shelters, was a monster at home. She paused, looking straight at Dorian. She was right. By the time closing arguments arrived, the public had already made up its mind. Social media campaigns demanding justice went viral. Major news outlets ran nightly specials. Hashtags like #JusticeForAmira trended in multiple countries. Supporters wore teal ribbons in her honor, held candlelight vigils, and filled digital spaces with her artwork, her poetry, her laughter. Still, the jury's verdict was not guaranteed. The defense had spent weeks building a thin thread of doubt, anchored to mental instability, trauma, and religious justification. But when the jury returned after just 14 hours of deliberation, they delivered a verdict as sharp and unforgiving as the truth itself. Guilty. First-degree murder. Obstruction of justice. Aggravated coercion. As the judge read the sentence, life without parole, Amira's family collapsed into tears. Her sister clutched her father's arm. Her mother whispered a prayer into the silence. Dorian remained still, expression unreadable, as if even the weight of justice could not pierce the armor of his conviction. Outside the courthouse, cheers erupted. Strangers embraced. Survivors of domestic abuse came forward on live streams, saying they felt seen. The case had become more than a headline. It was a reckoning. If you've stayed with us through this heartbreaking journey, we invite you to subscribe to Dark Psychology True Crime Story for more in-depth narratives just like this one, crafted with care, respect, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Hit that bell icon so you never miss a story that demands to be told. And if Amira's story moved you, share this video, comment her name, and help us honor her memory by keeping her voice alive. Because in the end, Amira Delgado didn't die in silence. Her truth echoed. Her story burned through darkness. And her legacy may just save lives.